Hey everyone, welcome to Designing a Digital Brand and Strategy. We'll be covering a couple things. We want to try and talk about budget, hygiene rate, budget, audience, the difference between branding and marketing, and a couple other things. So we're going to take questions at the end of this. But feel free to type them in the chat as we go. I'll look at them. I'll try to cover everything. I'm going to try and go through it fairly quickly so that we have more time to talk at the end, and then you guys can talk and give questions about certain things so we can focus on those things, because I want this to be an interactive piece. Additionally, if you look at the top of the chat, there's documents. If you guys want to fill those out when we're at those sections, you can download those. They're PDFs, fill them out at your leisure, and they'll kind of just help you walk through the strategy. So I'll also send you these slides after we're done. Without further ado, let's start. So designing a digital brand and strategy. There's a lot of different names for this. You can call it branding and marketing. You can call it digital strategy. Getting your business chugging, so making sure that your brand is communicating with your audiences so that you are creating revenue for your business. And I think my main point here is just to let you know there's a lot of different ways to say branding and marketing, and a lot of people say them differently. They're very similar, and we're going to talk about the difference of them and how you can implement that for your brand and implement marketing from your brand. So I am Zach Johnson-Medland. I'm owner at Gumption Design Company. So I do branding, websites, and content to give your brand gumption. So we work with businesses to help create brands that implement across multiple media. So that's usually digital. I have a large background in digital. I went to school for graphic design for digital media, and I then went into an internship that turned into a job for about 2 years at a digital agency up in Scranton, Posture Interactive. After that, I moved down to Lancaster, where I'm based now. I actually worked with two dudes painting houses for a little bit while I was getting settled with my wife. And then I took a job at a fly fishing shop doing their e-commerce, branding, marketing, a bunch of different things with them over in Reading. So they had 4 locations up in State College, Boiling Springs, and all across PA. And they did a large portion of business online. So I started with them right before the pandemic and went with them for about 2 years. After those 2 years, I started working with SCORE, and I started learning the value that branding has for small businesses, especially in Lancaster, PA, and how it can bring them a lot of value to translate the things they're already doing to give their brand more value. So a couple things to beware are the buzzwords when it comes to marketing and branding. There's a lot of buzzwords out there, and I think it can be a pitfall trap for a lot of people because it's really nice to feel like you understand something, right? And I think sometimes these buzzwords get a little bit more credit than is needed. So some of the buzzwords are SEO. If anyone would like to, does anyone know what SEO is? Before I say that, you can say it in the chat. Yes, Jean Marie. Search engine optimization. So it's search engine optimization, and it's one of those things that is really great for your brand, except I think sometimes people get a little bit too focused on that aspect before doing the groundwork and laying some basic groundwork. Same thing with alignment. So alignment of your brand values. If you get too stuck on any of these buzzwords, sometimes that can be a trap for you guys instead of just focusing on the bare essentials to get started with the business and then focusing on some of these things. So briefly, some of the other buzzwords that are bad: VR, AR, just be aware. Gurus that are out there to try and sell you something. Fancy titles, you'll run into this a lot in the creative industry. Nephews with an iPad. So I was once this nephew with an iPad, and I am saying this as a word of caution that your nephew may be really great at graphic design or marketing. But just be aware that you get what you pay for, kind of thing. Of like, if you're not paying him anything, it may be good for now, but when you need to put that on a t-shirt and you find out that it doesn't work as a file format or it doesn't translate correctly, don't be surprised. So there's nothing wrong with that. I was once that person doing that, and that's how people get started, but just be aware. And then finally, excessive cleverness. I put this picture of Mad Men up because I think a lot of times when people think of branding or marketing, they think of Don Draper smoking a cigarette, drinking whiskey. I don't think that's really what marketing is anymore. Maybe it was at one point. And just be aware if you're going to a marketing agency or working with designers or branders, that if they're acting like this, it may be to conjure up a sense that they're better at something than they actually are. And you should really be making sure that the results are what you're focusing on. So now that we're past the beware, let's talk about some definitions of these things. So marketing and branding, and what's the difference? So marketing, I would say, is the funnel that you put people through to get them to buy into your service or product. It sounds really dry and it sounds a little bit inhumane, but I mean, it's just a structure that you use to let people know about your product and service. And then branding, on the other hand, is what your product and service stands for, or what values it gives to people, and what problems it solves for them. So again, branding is a little bit more of a long-term solution, that when you have these values that you've created, then you apply them to your marketing, which is the strategy to put them through. And optimally, on this side, you'll see the funnel. You start with a lot of customers at the top of the funnel of marketing, and you slowly hone into the customers at the bottom that you want. So again, the funnel of marketing is usually, I think it starts with awareness, and then intrigue, and then you get them to buy in a little bit. And then as they get closer, you really want to turn them into a customer and sell them your product. And your marketing, whether it's social media, website, even print marketing, should really be pushing them towards the bottom of the funnel and slowly honing them in to see if they're actually a good customer or not. Your branding can really help do that through its design, its strategy, and figuring those things out between the print design and the digital design. My background is in digital design mainly, because I was in a digital agency. Because I'm a little bit younger, that tends to be what happens. But I still do work in print as well. So digital design might be social media, websites, and then print design would probably be like billboards, ads in the paper. I always like to say those little diner ads that are at the bottom of the menu. I love those. And it's really interesting because those are actually really effective if you know what audience you're trying to find. Welcome, everyone. If you're getting in a little late, there's a bunch of stuff at the top of the chat. If you want to fill in those as we go out, we'll be filling those out. So now we're going to kind of go through some of the parts of your businesses, and you guys should download those documents and then slowly fill them out with me. And then we'll come back with some questions. And if you have questions as you're doing it, go ahead and put them in the chat. So first, we're going to talk about audience, because that's one of the most important parts of your brand, is figuring out who you're selling to. So let's see. If someone wouldn't mind chatting me who they think their audience is and what services they sell. And we'll use them as kind of a case study. Hey, Amy, it looks like, okay, Pamela. I'm just going to use Pamela's business. Let's see, baby boomers, healthy aging and fitness. So let's see, the fitness industry. Pamela, what is your business? wait a second for everyone to put in some of that information. Okay, so Pamela is starting in e-commerce to learn about digital marketing and to be able to start a brand and launch books and videos. And it looks like her audience she was talking about is baby boomers. So that would be your age, what age they are. So that's usually 55 plus. What they do, they would be in the fitness industry. It sounds like you are targeting men and women, usually because children aren't baby boomers. Where do they work? So that might be a good question for Pamela when you're looking at your audience. Typically, sometimes where they work doesn't apply to all businesses, but you want to try and think of your audience in terms of use cases. So this document is a simplified use case kind of scenario of you're trying to figure out what are your main use cases and people that you can picture buying your product or service. So let's use Pamela again. What are their hobbies? So for a fitness industry, that would be their fitness. They're really into being in shape. They may run on the weekends. So a way to target them, you could think about that, is to focus on either Facebook ads that would target people in those ranges, or reaching out to like a running magazine or Instagram feed that needs sponsorship opportunities and you sponsor with them. And then how much money are they willing to spend? This can be a tough question when you're first starting out. And I've seen a lot of brands struggle with pricing themselves too low or too high. But you really want to think about, okay, if you have baby boomers, let's say they're into fitness, what are they willing to spend for fitness, right? A way to think about that would be to think about their lifestyle and what other things they're spending money on. So for a baby boomer, if they're having health issues, fitness is probably going to be a larger part of their life. They're going to have a little bit more time. So you could probably price it fairly high. Now, you'd want to make sure to focus in on what their budget constraints are and start talking to an audience member once you have audience. That's another important part of the audience, is that when this is happening, you want to make sure that you are talking to someone that is in that audience. You don't want to just make this up in your head and put out into the world, although that is one way to do it and will certainly work, but you'll get much quicker results if you develop an audience and then test it with an audience. So think about it like product testing. You want to build your product or service and then go to that audience and see if it works with them, because ultimately you're solving problems for them. That's a great example, Amy. You researched your individuals and jobs and broke it down accordingly. You added approximately 15% to the hourly rate because I'm not an employer, but a contractor, so I pay my own health insurance. So for Amy, who's a contractor, making sure your pricing also includes your hourly rate, which is what you need to make. And we'll go over that in a second. And then also adding on, you're not getting health insurance, so you want to make sure that you're adding that on to your costs as well. And that's a good point too, Amy, is you want to make sure you're reassessing your audience. So this printout would be a great way to reassess later. Does anyone have any questions about any of these before I move on? You can type it in the chat. Okay, to keep everyone's time, I'm going to keep going. No, we're probably all eating lunch, so I want to make sure. Oh, here we go. How does it work if you make multiple products? That's a great question, Teresa. So ultimately, you want to do this for all of your products. And it can be really time consuming, but having this information later helps you to test it against your product as you change, if that makes sense. So you want to keep this information. So let's say you sell t-shirts, stickers, and posters. I know that because I do that sometimes. So I really like design stuff. Each of those products is going to have a different audience, although the audience may be similar to each other. So you may be, someone that buys a t-shirt is also going to want a poster. That may not always be true, but you want to make sure to make note of the relationship between the audiences as well. So if you have multiple audiences, you want to make sure that you are doing each assessment and then assessing the relationship between them. So also for my services, I offer branding, website, and content. What tends to happen is people come to me for a website. We start their website, and the past designer they used didn't create the right files or something like that, so they need branding. And then later on in the process, as they grow as a business, they need content. So it tends to develop into each other. And it tends to work well if you can do that, because that's how you know it's all one business. If the product and audiences are so different from each other, they should probably be different businesses, honestly, if they're not intermingling at all. And then Nicole Welch, what about if your fees are given to you? I'm not sure I understand that question right now, Nicole. If you want to keep that question, we're going to move forward. And if some of these later things don't answer it for you, please ask it again. And I'll try to come back to it. I'll write it down. Oh, so you're saying the cost of your product includes a national registration fee. So I guess I would break that up into a monthly cost. Again, you're estimating a lot of this. Like, this is not going to be the most accurate thing in the world, but you're trying to get somewhere to start and to target first. Does that make sense? I'm going to keep moving, and then we can follow up at the end. So now that you have your audience, let's try to define your brand a little bit. So your brand is going to structure what your marketing should do. So your brand can be a lot of things. It can be your logo. It can be your digital presence online, so social media, websites. It can also be things like how you, if you're an individual business or sole proprietorship, present yourself. And if you have multiple employees, it can be how your employees present themselves. So I worked at a fly fishing shop, and even though I was a design person, so I was usually on a computer, either at home doing work or running into the fly shop to get pictures of things, that kind of thing. So I wasn't your typical fishing employee. I still had the culture in me. So I like fly fishing. I liked talking about it. So every now and then I'd start talking with customers behind the desk, just because I really enjoyed it. But that's an important part of a brand, is you want to make sure that the people in your company reflect that culture. And that's really important. So some of the more marketable ways to define your strategy. Does your branding attract your ideal customer? So that kind of goes back to that audience, and making sure that your branding, your logo, your website, your content online, and the people reflect and attract your ideal customer. So I'm going to take the example from Pamela. She had an e-commerce targeting baby boomers. If all of her branding is really bright and feels like something out of a futuristic social media ad, that's not going to attract her ideal customer, right? You want to make sure that what you do is attracting your ideal customer always. And that can be really hard. And again, you're going to have to reassess it consistently. And that feeds into your strategy and marketing. Some of the more technical aspects of your brand, and I try to focus on this a lot when I first get a client, is does my logo have various file formats? You would not believe the number of times people have either a sketched out logo that they are using for something. And then also maybe there's a difference between two file formats of JPEG and PNG, which is one is similar to a painting where there's just layers on top of each other. And then one is more similar to a piece of glass that has the image imprinted on it. So if you can't have that transparency, that can be a real problem for digital assets. Some of these file formats are really important for printing as well, because they read the math that is in the file formats. Some other technical aspects are your website flow. So does your website flow naturally and encourage next steps? So to me, this usually looks like adding call to actions to a website, making sure that information is presented hierarchically. So what I mean by that is that when you come into a website, your first question is probably, what is this? And something should define that for you first. And then once you are within the website, you should be able to find more information about that quickly and easily through the navigation, sometimes through pop-ups, although sometimes pop-ups are really intrusive. And then is your brand consistent across all of your mediums? So whether it's digital or print, making sure that your logo looks the same on your digital formats, that it is printing out the same because sometimes colors change. Also that your wording and verbal presentation is the same. So if online on your website, you sound really professional, but then in your social media, you sound very casual, that can be really hard for people to understand. And they don't know how to approach you. So you want to make sure that you are keeping the same tone across all brands. Okay, it looks like we have a lot of people commenting in here. Any questions about defining your brand before we move on quickly? Thanks, Amy. Yeah, I think the way you talk about things on social media or any other is really important. Although social media usually tends to be somewhere where you can talk a little bit more casually, you want to remember that people are still listening. So a common thing that I see with a lot of graphic designers is complaining about other clients that they're having, and that doesn't seem very professional to me. Sure, there's like letting off steam, but if you're complaining about your clients who are actually the people who pay you, then that kind of sends a signal to me. So beware of signals you may be sending through your voice. Pamela, is there a way that you know of to design a logo? I'm very creative, but struggling with name and logo. So I will go over some tools at the end. And some of those tools will be defined kind of by some of these questions about money. So we're going to talk about budgeting and marketing budgeting specifically, which includes branding can be in your marketing budget. If you have a line item of your budget that is marketing, I would include branding in that. And then you want to split that out over several years if that's going to be something that you use for several years. So we can talk about that more if people have questions about that. So first, you're going to start with how much money do you need to make as a business? And if you don't know this or haven't thought about this, I would really suggest that you talk to a SCORE mentor, because financial planning can really help you later as you scale up. I'm not sure what you mean, Amy. I'll come back to you. as we get through this. So how much money do you need to make? So if you need to make $80,000 to clear your expenses and to pay yourself, let's use 80,000 as a number. You can put in however much you need to make. I'm not going to ask people to put that forward because I know that's a really personal thing. If you need to make 80,000, how many products or services do you need to sell to make that happen? Let's think about that. So if I sell a product, let me get my handy dandy calculator. Also, I always keep a calculator at my desk. Really recommend it. Preferably a solar one because it's really chunky and fun to play with. Okay, let's see, 80,000. Let's say our services cost, just for numbers' sake, I'm going to make it easy, 5,000. So if each of your services cost $5,000 or product, then you need to sell 16 of those products to clear your expenses, right? And now thinking about that in terms to marketing, do I want someone helping me with this? This is where, I mean, in general, this is business management of like, if I want someone helping me, I hire another person, right? So if I want someone helping me specifically to marketing, to help get the word out, to hone in on your branding, to hone in on your pitch, and hone in on your audience, things like that marketing provides, then you start thinking about, do I want to hire someone? So this first page is just getting to the point of like, do I want to hire someone? And if you see, hey, I need to make $80,000 and I need to sell 16 products, it may not be viable for you to hire someone yet. And at that point, I would encourage you to talk to a score mentor about what you could do, and other ways that you can save money, and think about that. If you're really set on hiring someone, you may not need to. And then talking about if you want to hire someone. So if on that last page you said, yes, I do want to hire someone to do that, how much should you spend on those products and services to help you with those things? So the first question I would ask you is, how much time are you spending doing it yourself that you could be doing something else? Because being the business owner is a much more important duty than being the business marketer, because you can market as much as you want, but if you don't have a good product or service to give people, then they're not going to come back to you. So it's really more important to be, because you are the business owner, to be spending your time doing that. And maybe you have extra time to do it. So how much time are you spending doing it yourself? So I'm going to use this as, let's say this person spends a day a week doing marketing. So that's about 8 hours. And are you having results? And maybe you are. Maybe you're having great results. In that case, don't do anything. But in this case, let's say this person is not having any results. No. What am I costing the business and myself by not paying someone else to do this? This is a really hard question that sometimes you got to do some soul searching for, of like, are you really stressed out about the marketing? Some people get really anxious about posting on social media. Are you really stressed out? You don't understand website stuff and it makes you really frustrated. That is a fair point. Websites are really frustrating. I know fully well. I love websites, but sometimes, man, things don't work the way you want them to, and you have to do a lot of research and development and things like that. So it can be cost-wise. What are you costing the business? So it could be this person is doing it 8 hours and it's not working, and maybe they charge $115 an hour. So handy dandy calculator, 8 times 115. You're costing the business $920 every week for no results. I would say that's a bad investment. And that's where you kind of have to take yourself out of the process and your ego out of the process and say, well, my time isn't really doing anything. So if you were to pay someone and saw a 5x return, would you be happy? So this kind of goes back to what some of the notes I have on the side, which are typically speaking, in marketing, you want to see at top level a 5x return. This is kind of up to you to keep track of. Your marketer will probably give you the information needed to, but as a business owner, you have to keep track of that information as well to make sure you're having a return on investment. And if you saw this person was losing $920 a week, if you paid someone $920 a week, multiply that by 5, and you saw $4,600 increase in sales every month or every week, would that pay off? And that might look like, one product sold every month. You can kind of do some of the math on what that looks like for how many products you have to sell. But would you be happy with that return? And most of the times, what I hear from people, as they're growing as a company, at first, it doesn't make sense when they're one person. But as soon as they start to scale, it really starts to be important because they have so much time that has to be devoted to meeting with clients, doing other things than posting on social media, updating their website, and playing with their logo to make sure it prints on a shirt correctly. There are people who enjoy that, so you might want to let them do it. And then rule of thumb here on the side, general rule of thumb. I'm not saying this applies to everyone, but in marketing, people suggest spending about 2 to 5% a year on your marketing. So if you are making $100,000 or less, that's about $2,000 to $5,000 a year should be spent on marketing. $200,000 to $500,000, you're looking at $4,000 to $25,000 on marketing, and then $500,000 and over, you're looking at $10,000 and more. Once you hit that mark, that's probably where you start to look at either hiring someone full-time or making sure that you have a really strong relationship with your marketer or brand manager or designer, or whatever name they go by. I'm going to keep going just to keep us on track. Again, save some questions if you have them. So now that you've decided whether you want to pay someone or not and how much to pay them, who should you pay? And I think, 𝗘𝗩𝗘𝗡𝗧, I will come back to your question. Save it for later. I promise we'll come back. Who should I pay? You should make sure you trust them above all else, because a lot of times, if you do not have good trust with them, you will not trust them with business information. And you will be talking about business information with them. And you probably should be about sales just to make sure that they are on track. You want to make sure that they're reliable. So if they're responding to your emails in a timely fashion, whatever that looks like for you, that they have a good track record so that they've worked with companies maybe you like that also go towards your audience. They have a specialty. This is something I see a lot, is people who are good at everything, but don't say they have any kind of specialty. A lot of times, really good marketers or designers have some kind of specialty. Just because of, as a human, you develop a tendency towards something, or you like doing something. That's not to say they are not good at other things, but it's a good telltale sign if someone can admit that they have a specialty, because we're human and that makes them human. So just looking for their specialty and being aware of how that'll affect their marketing. So if you're looking for someone with a visual specialty, like most of my work focuses on the visual and design aspects, then I'd be great for you. But if you wanted more SEO strategy, I'm not great for you. And there are plenty of people that are really good at SEO strategy. That kind of covers they enjoy what they do. That kind of tells you what their specialty is usually, or what kind of products and services they'll like working with. Your work culture aligns. So this kind of goes back to trust and the reliability. If you're someone who likes to wake up at 12 a.m. and email people ideas, and you expect a return on that, then someone who only responds between 9 a.m. and 5 a.m. may not be a good fit for you. So you want to make sure that the way they work and they're devoted to their work also aligns with you. And that they also work with your audience. So if they are focusing, like 𝗔𝗕𝗢𝗏, on farmers and sustainable agriculture and things like that, then you want to work with someone like 𝗔𝗕𝗢𝗏. And then finally, they use the right tools for their industry. So if I like to use the example of a photographer, if a photographer showed up to my wedding with a film camera, I would be like, hey, you probably shouldn't be shooting for my wedding, because the film will not translate well to digital. It might, but it'll be really costly and time consuming. So you want to make sure that their tools are correct for the industry they're in and the time they're in. That being said, there are some slight variations of, like, I know some really good illustrators who work only on paper and then at the last second throw everything into a computer. But you want to be aware of what tools they're using. Teresa, what's the best way to determine someone's specialty? For example, if I'm looking for someone to clean up my SEO, what do I look for? In that, I would say looking specifically for an SEO specialist. Kind of biting myself in the butt here by saying some of those buzzwords. SEO is really important. I don't want to say that it isn't. So there is a time and place. But yeah, if you're looking specifically for someone with SEO, ask for that, because that is a very specific niche thing. I can give you some recommendations after if you'd like to contact me, and we'll talk about that. What tools are used? Professionally and casually. So these are just things in general that I use and know people that use. So for marketing, Canva is really great. It is a design tool, and it gives you the ability to easily use other people's designs in your own to make really quick things. So it works really great for social media, for really quick graphics that you need for something. Be aware that you are sometimes using other people's content. So all of the things that you buy into there are created by someone else. So that's where it gets dicey with, if you make a logo there, technically, if you were to trademark it, it might not be yours. That's kind of a case-by-case scenario. Yeah, so just be aware that not everything in there you may own as a business asset. Moving on, Meta Business. So this is Facebook and Instagram's new business platform that they're using. It's really great for scheduling things. It has a lot of analytics. I use it for social media ads. When people have them, you can schedule things out, and you can really target in your audience that you want to target. On top of that, for social media posting, Hootsuite is really great. I do believe the free plan has like 2 accounts you can use on it. So that's a really great one if you want to use, like, I use it for LinkedIn because Meta doesn't connect to LinkedIn. And then there's a bunch of other planner tools like Hootsuite. If you type in social media planner on Google or something to that effect, you'll find something. And finally, in marketing, ChatGPT. So there's a ChatGPT is a AI platform that is being used for a lot of other marketing platforms. So you'll see a lot of other websites popping up that actually essentially use ChatGPT without crediting it. So you can just go right to the source by using that. So what you do is you chat with AI that is using machine learning. So they trained it by giving it certain information and then telling it how to use that information. And then you can ask it things like, describe an event that does X, Y, and Z. Similar to Canva, be aware that all of that may not be original. And it's definitely going to need editing. And it's not quite at the point where it's like, I wouldn't throw something in there and then just copy and paste it into something. I would make sure that you are on top of that and editing it. And there's someone in between the processes. Always make sure you have a person in there. Yeah, Grammarly is great for editing as well. It's a great one, Amy. I see there's a lot of great suggestions in here. If you guys want to look in those suggestions in the chat, it looks like some of these other ones. There is an endless number of these kind of things, and these are just some of them. Yeah. So for design, being a designer at heart, I always trust the Adobe suite just because I pay a monthly fee to them. So I know that they're editing their services and making updates. It tends to be just what designers use because it all works together. So I use Adobe Illustrator, Adobe Photoshop, Adobe InDesign, and each of those are for different purposes. So Illustrator I use for logo work because that makes sure that you're using vector so that a printer can use it. Photoshop is really much more like painting where you're like rasterizing graphics. InDesign is for large scale like layout documents. And then Procreate is an illustrative tool on the iPad that a lot of people are using now. Yeah, there's a lot of great suggestions in here. Thanks, Ashley. Good suggestion. Hemingway app. Okay, so I tried to cover everything as best I could. Let me know what kind of questions you guys have. Jean Marie, I'm not seeing suggestions. Can you guys all see the chat? I'm just curious. Oh, thanks, Jean Marie. Okay. Any other additional questions? Okay. Tips and tricks with Facebook ads. Hashtag Monday, it's Wednesday. Tips and tricks, 𝗘𝗩𝗘𝗡𝗧. Let's talk about Facebook ads. Facebook ads is a good one with that audience document, is make sure you know your audience and who you're talking to. So for example, I used to do when I started Facebook ads to outdoor enthusiasts because I was really into the outdoor sector and nobody else. And they did not do well because I learned that those weren't people who wanted to invest in branding. They were people that were interested in the look of branding. So I think with Facebook ads or any ads in general is each time you pay for it is making sure that you adjust it slightly because you want to be comparing this ad to the last one. And like, what were you targeting last time and what worked about that? And then take that and change it a little bit with some strategic element and then try it again. That being said, if you find after like 2 or 3 times that Facebook ads are not working for you, don't keep dumping money into them. Yeah, exactly, Amy. As some people find them to be productive in their specific niche audience. And that's where I found it really helpful is if you like focus in really hard on one specific group, then they work really well, but don't use them as like a shotgun approach where you're just like throwing information out there. Any other questions on any of the prior sheets about anything there? Is email marketing still effective, Teresa? It was claimed to be years ago. I've had a really hard time getting this up and running, and I wonder if it's worth my time. I think yes. So email marketing is very effective. It is, again, you have to make sure you're talking to your audience and that you have a large audience. So the hardest part I find with a lot of customers is that they are not collecting emails at some point in their business. You know, so I have a carpenter that I work with up in Canada, and he goes to trade shows, but he wasn't collecting emails of people that were interested in his things. So every time we would send out emails, we were only sending them out to like 70 people, which is a lot for him, but they weren't 70 people who would be likely to hire him for a large scale carpentry project. Does that make sense? Yeah, exactly, Jean Marie, is you want to make sure that you are owning those assets. So collecting those emails, because technically in a legal sense, you want to make sure that you have buy-in from your customer first. You don't want just having all these emails of random people. But yeah, you want to make sure you're collecting those, because that is a business asset. So if you were to sell the business tomorrow, you can use an email list as a business asset to sell because they're your customers. Yeah, that's another great one, Jean Marie, is making sure that you have, this can kind of go into your marketing funnel, is having something at the top of the marketing funnel to get people's emails. So Teresa, if you wanted to email me after this and just say like, what are some ways to get some emails in that list? Just let me know and we'll talk about it. Where should I place the freebie on my homepage? Amy, where should I place the freebie? Yeah, at the top, optimally. Or, I mean, I don't love pop-ups, but pop-ups are sometimes effective for those kind of things. And just making sure that if you do a pop-up, you make sure that it's really easy to get out of. Yeah. Any other questions about some of the prior slides and information? Yeah, thanks, Amy, for making it. Are there any, so from 𝗘𝗩𝗘𝗡𝗧, are there any specific webinars that you can suggest that focus on creating Google ads and making sure they're effective? I don't have anything that comes to mind, but I can write down your name and give you an email, 𝗘𝗩𝗘𝗡𝗧. I also know some people that are in the space. So I work out of the candy factory, and a lot of people there are really into like SEO and some of the ad stuff. So I can connect you with someone there that might know more than me. It is great, isn't it? And then a lead magnet needs to be relevant though, giving me an introduction. Yeah, that's a good point, is if you're offering something free, you want to make sure it's relevant to your audience. All right, we are approaching the end of the seminar. If you guys have any questions, feel free to ask me, email me. I'll email you these slides afterwards. And I'd love to hear what your thoughts are about the presentation. Thank you, SCORE, for hosting this, and I appreciate it. Thank you all for coming.